In March of 1941, Marvel Comics published Captain America, the first of many to spark a lucrative comic franchise. But it wasn't always that way. In the late 20th century, Marvel Comics struggled against its competitor DC Comics, with a roster of heroes that seemed to be just not iconic enough. So, in the late 90s, Marvel sold many of their larger names and went bankrupt. This was devastating to the company until 2008, when the Marvel Cinematic Universe hit theaters. 70 years after the original comics debut, Captain America found his foothold in the cinematic world in 2011's Captain America: The First Avenger. Following scrawny and ill Steve Rogers as he fruitlessly fights for his right to serve in the United States military, through blood, sweat, and tears, the patriotic runt qualifies himself for a super soldier experiment that turns him into the patriotic idol, Captain America, who is immediately used as a propaganda machine. In all fairness, the first two-thirds of this movie are brilliant and reflect not just the original storyline, but also its impact on the world at large. Many people, both then and now, saw Captain America, and by extension his DC counterpart Superman, as a propaganda machine for the US government. And although it's not hard to see why, there was never any official documents to suggest the commission. Among the myriad of throwbacks in the film, the most eye-catching to observant comic fans has to be the two shields used. The first prop shield that Steve uses in the dejecting shows is a callback to the original shield that was changed after the first issue of the comics to avoid a copyright issue with a similar DC character. And thus, the iconic Captain America shield was born. Able to be thrown and returned to the user like a boomerang, it was both a defensive tool and a weapon. So of course, it got a shiny Vibranium pill version in the 2011 adaptation. So even though we're a few days late to the holiday and have no access to the fantasy element Vibranium, I still wish you a happy Independence Day, as for this episode of DIY Prop Culture Builds, we build Captain America's Vibranium shield. For materials, you will need a 24-inch diameter trash can lid, red and blue spray paints, aluminum tape, as well as cardboard, Gorilla Glue, and polyester strapping. I originally attempted this build with 2 pizza pans for a base, and as you can see here, I used a ratchet strap I got from Walmart and cut sections of it out for my handles. My original plan was to nail these into the first pizza pan and glue the two together, but not only were the handles far too unstable, but the non-stick pans failed to adhere to each other. Not to mention the 16-inch diameter pans were far too small and just looked plain goofy. So I bought another base alongside an entire trash can I really didn't need and worked on forming the shield. The first step was to remove the handle of the lid, and with some effort and maybe 5 minutes, it came right off. It was way easier than I thought it was going to be. Okay, at this point I had a small victory and I hit a bit of a high, so I went right on with the rest of the build and got it done in a few days, which was a welcome change. I used a pair of metal shears to cut sections out of the rim and proceeded to fold them down into the back and hammer them in. I got out my Gorilla Glue and cut the appropriate length handles. Your size will vary depending on how large your arms are and how loose you want the shield to be, so I really can't give you a good measurement here. After letting the handles dry, it's on to painting. I wasn't too super worried about the holes in the front, because I planned on blocking those out with the star symbols anyways. This part's pretty simple really. I used the masking tape to mask out all but the center of the shield, and then spray painted that blue. I waited for it to dry and then did the same with the red parts. Once that was done, I cut the star pieces out of cardboard, and then finished them off with the aluminum tape to make them appear like they were the appropriate metal. I then glued them into place. So once that's done and it dries, you too will have your very own Vibranium shield. So once I had the plan for this build, it wasn't really that hard. It took a few days maybe. I would say it's a novice build. For cost, not including the discarded version, I spent maybe $35 in the whole thing. As always, thank you for watching. If you built along, then comment below and tell me where to find it, because I'd love to see it. If you have any suggestions for a future prop, then feel free to leave that down there too. I may build it one day. And as always, if you like this video and you want to see more, then subscribe and turn on the bell to get notified when I upload next.